And Erin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited for today. I've been excited for today ever since we had the idea to participate in this global collage movement that is World Collage Day. Few things I wanted to share about World Collage Day are that it was started in 2018 as part of Collage magazine. And the goal of the day is to elevate collage practice, is to say that this is an absolutely important, viable, interesting, wonderful, dynamic way of making images and expressing yourself. And we need to give it the dignity that it deserves by giving it its very own day. So our event is part of a whole global movement. There are events happening all over the world today for World Collage Day. There are art shows, there are people getting together and just making collages on living room floors. There are people coming together in educational settings and all sorts of different places to do collage. So we are participating in that today, which is really exciting. A couple of other things I wanted to share about collage before we start are the benefits of it, right? So collage has been shown to be a whole brain process, meaning that your entire brain is working when you're doing a collage. And if you think about it, that makes sense, right? You're looking, you're seeking something out, and then you're finding it, you're selecting it. And then you've got the physical process of cutting it out, and then the arranging process, and then the meaning making, right? All of those different things are happening when you're making a collage. And if none of that fits for you, maybe it's just fun, right? So we're going to have a little bit of both of those things today, exploring the fun of collage, as well as thinking about how it might be something that's beneficial and helpful for you in processing life and working through things. All right. So if we could look at the studio desk camera now. I first wanted to share the beautiful poster that was created for part of today and the wonderful collage that was created in today's World Collage Day. So a couple things that I think are really interesting that we can learn from this image are thinking about when you include humans, what direction are they looking and what are they doing, right? And then what other elements are added in, and then thinking about color. Right, so this has lots of color, but you can see that there's kind of this communication happening between the red arrow over here and it looks like maybe a little COVID molecule, and the red pants, and then the kind of creepy clown over here with his big drum. So lots of fun in this image, and wanted to start out sharing that. All right, and with this image, which is the image that we use to talk about our World Collage Day event. This is in my ArtJournalSnacks journal, and you might see some texture here that looks a little bit interesting. And this is one of the things that we're going to explore today as we make art. So before I get too much further with this, I wanted to say that the idea behind how we do our live classes for ArtSnacks is that you're working along with us, meaning don't feel like you have to just sit there and watch my hands move around and listen to me talk. It's definitely a time to be actively making as well. And if I'm demonstrating something, of course, you can pause and see what I'm up to, but we want to encourage you to be actively making as we're working together today. So I'll talk a little bit more about this texture in a bit here, but I did want to say that I found one more thing that I thought deserved to go onto this page. These little citrus and then the little sections of citrus that almost look like it's having like a little exclamation, which goes well with the exclamation mark that's stamped here onto this page. So some of the other things going on this page are the mixed media, right? Mixing things in with the collage. So there's collage material, there's this special mark making that we'll explore more in a bit. There's ink stamping, and then this is a oil-based crayon that's over top, right? So a little bit of everything, and then this spot to do a little bit of writing. So I thought what I would write into that section there, there's something good to write with, a crayon. is some of the benefits for collage. So whole brain. And it is visual. And it's an opportunity to re-author your story. And what I mean by that, this idea of re-authoring your story, is you're taking things out of the context that they started in, and you're making a new image, right? You're making something that is yours. So here's this doorway that this original collage image is from. I think it's from a fashion magazine, from some kind of interesting photo shoot where it looks like they brought dirt or sand into the inside environment. And it's a little bit creepy, this dark doorway. So I wanted to create it as almost a place of possibility instead of a scary place. Hence the bright colors and the other textures that are happening on this page. Okay, so I'll probably play some more with this now that I've done the wax crayon, because that'll create a nice resist. I'm going to set that aside for a minute, and we'll look at another use of collage. So this one was from, I think, from a clothing catalog where they did a photo shoot in Africa, and there were these wonderful giraffes, including the little baby giraffe over here. And so this is just taking a couple parts of that one image and cutting or ripping it apart and then adding other textures to it. So think about how you could use one page from a magazine or one page from a source and use that to tell a story across a single collage. And then here is another example, again, kind of with that idea, taking one page, cutting a few elements out of it, and then telling a story. So these are peonies and bowls full of lemons. And I wrote, "Enjoy the lemons, no need for a lemonade." And I'm not entirely sure yet what I mean by that, but it was fun to create the page and play with these white bowls and the bright lemons. And then one more collage example I wanted to show before we got started is using the color. So responding to the color. I found this image that looks like maybe porcelain or other ceramic floral sculpture. And then I found this in a separate spot, but the colors here seem to be just right with this. And I had already created this mixed media background in my art journal. And oh my gosh, they were the perfect colors all together. So this kind of happened accidentally, but it's a way of placing things together using this idea of collage and then creating something that is visually cohesive. Okay, so those were some examples of ways to create collage. And what I want to do now is show you something kind of wild. Okay, so I'm going to we're going to use something that seems like it shouldn't be an art supply. This is Never Dull. It's a metal polish. It's meant to get corrosion off of metals, but it's also an incredible art supply. Okay, so I will warn you that for those of you who knew we were doing this today and purchased this and didn't quite know what we were going to do with it yet, if you don't have a window open, you do want to open a window or a door. You want to make sure, because it does have a bit of a fume to it. Okay, this is what it looks like inside. It's like this cottony stuff. And it feels not oily, not wet. It just feels a little bit strange. You can see it makes my fingers a little bit glossy. Now what you can do with this, and I'll show you a couple different ways that you can play with this stuff. This is a stencil. I'm going to put that down first. I'm going to put my collage material over top. I'm going to take a little bit of this Never Dull wadding and rubbing on the surface, you can see that it's almost acting like an eraser of the pigment, but also it's showing the stencil through there. You can see my little polka dot patterns. People that are familiar with my pattern preferences know that I have a very, very fond feeling about polka dots. So it rubs the pigment away and creates this really interesting texture. And so this is one way that you can play with magazine or collage material and start to make it your own, right? So you can erase parts of the image that don't speak to you and then incorporate that into another piece of collage. And you can also do what I just did right there. There was some text left over from the magazine and I've just erased it, right? There's a little bit of it left and I can go up here and just make that go away. Okay. So doing this, you can start to create some interesting elements that you can collage with later. Okay. So that's one example, kind of using a pattern. Another magazine here. So I'll show you another example of where I've done this. This one I used a couple different stencils, and then I also did some mark making over the top of it. So this was a piece of material, collage material that had this mosaic pattern on already, and then I accentuated that by adding some of my own. And now looking at this, it would be very hard to determine, where did this come from, right? What is this weird texture that you've created? So again, you can kind of take parts of it and erase parts of the image or obscure parts of the image that aren't yours, right? So this little frame, this little face here, sorry, child, but I'm going to erase that and then I can add something there that speaks to me. So it's a different way of doing collage. Instead of cutting out the parts you don't want, you can move that.
Yeah, go through this there.
So same up here, I'm going to change. Just erase that framed image and then I can add in there whatever I want. And then here, this pattern on the lower cupboards isn't all that interesting, but what if I made it? Actually, since it's a bookshelf, I've got some letter forms here. So what if I you do have to push kind of hard. And I also find that it works best when you're working on a part of the page that has dark pigment. And it is also even a little better if you've got darker pigment next to something light, because it will smear a little bit. You can see that happening here. I can kind of smear the darker pigment down onto the lighter spot. Those candles there. Okay. So I'm going to keep my hand right here because I want to show you something else you can do. And you can see all the magazine pigment going on to this piece of never dull polish, right? A little bit onto your fingers too. Totally fine to wear gloves. Probably advisable. It's not like super toxic. I mean, don't eat this stuff, but just have to wash your hands well afterwards. Okay, so here I am going to take, it's just a crayon, And I'm going to take this wax crayon, holding my stencil right where it was. And now I'm adding some wax to this surface, which will enable a little bit of a resist. And again, it's moving this material from one technique used on it to multiple. And that just is making it more mine, right? Something that I can create and play with. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that text up here. I'm going to get a little more never dull.
Hey, Erin, just Sarah here jumping in. So we love this technique. We have a question in the question box here. Is there anything else you can recommend that would remove pigment like this if we don't have Never Dull on hand?
Great question. And an alcohol-based marker will do weird things with collage material, right? So if and this is going to depend on your magazine, but some of them will let you move. You can see it's moving the pigment a little bit here, not quite as much as the Never Dull will, but it will allow you to, again, kind of change what's going on your paper.
Thank you.
Yep. And so you can get this stuff at hardware stores. You can find it online. Sometimes you can actually get it at like a drug or grocery store if they have a big like home cleaning area. Definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It lasts a really long time. As long as you keep that lid on tight. Okay, so you can see some interesting things starting to happen here with this bookshelf, right? And I can keep playing with that idea. Okay. I want to show you couple other ways that I've done this. And then we'll start to play with putting some things together. So here's another one. This one, a little bit of Never Dull over here and a little bit of wax over on this side. Just putting that subtle texture onto this interesting piece. This one has some stars. This one has acrylic paint and then the Never Dull. I really like how this one came out. So this kind of this crackle pattern and then the beautiful vintage clothing on this one. Okay, so you can see depending on what you use, the effect can be very different. So it does take a little bit of experimentation because not every magazine will allow you to do that. Sometimes the pigment just won't shift around. It just depends on the way that it was printed, the original magazine. Okay, so now what I'd love to do is encourage us to start playing and putting together some kind of a collage. And I'm going to go to a page that'll work well for this in my art journal. This one has a little bit of bleed through from another page. And this is another great reason to incorporate a little bit of collage into your art journaling practice if it's not already, because it's a way to deal with this, right? A little bit of bleed through of this is watercolor ink coming through from one page to the other. So I could decide to play with that idea and keep a little bit of that orange since I have this nice piece. And I can start to find a place where that might live. One thing that I like to do when I'm starting a collage is bring some things together and just start to move them around. And they might not be the final thing, right? They might not be what I decide to keep on that page, but I just try to test them out and see what I think. I'm looking for maybe either something else that's warm colored that's going to go with this, or maybe something that's kind of nice, the stripes that are more in a gradient here, and then these more regular stripes. So this is a possibility. And actually that fits really nicely across the top. So I think I'm going to go ahead and glue that one down to start. That's always the moment of truth when you flip over something you're collaging and you see what's on the other side. And sometimes it's fine. And sometimes it's a heartbreaker, right? You've started putting the glue on and you realize, oh no, I love what's on the other side too. That happened to anybody? Happens to me all the time. When I did collage groups with older adults, we had a weekly collage group, and there was this one image that everybody loved. So we made photocopies of it, and I think 15 or 16 people used it in a collage in various forms over the years. Every so often I'm going through papers and I find it again. The hand holding flowers, but it was very much loved. Okay. So now the kind of the decision point of, do I still want to go with this idea of like the blue and the orange and working with these complementary colors on this page? Or do I want to think about something else entirely? So as you're working, continuing to move these things around and try different things, see what else you have in your space. I also have this kind of in these same colors. That's kind of a nice, I like that. Okay. So I think there are a couple different ways that you can effectively work with collage when you're sitting down and wanting to make a piece, is to think about, do I want to put this together totally intuitively and not have a plan? Or do I want to tell a specific story? Or do I want to let my materials make that decision for me? So sometimes I like to just sit down and start with one thing and then just keep adding to it. And other times I have a little bit more of an idea. And so I maybe glue one thing down and leave everything else loose and let it move around while I'm making decisions. Seeing what else is on my desk here. This is kind of funny. This is from a box that fruit came in. And this is from seeds that I got, and it's about pollinators. I think that's too small. I think I want something kind of big here, something that's going to be the main feature. Have a couple possibilities. So you should let us know in the chat what types of things you're collaging from today. What did you bring with you to experiment with? Oh, this is kind of perfect. This is from a card someone sent me, and that color seems to be exactly right in here. I'm just going to start going through and pulling out a couple other things that might be good candidates on this page. So that seems great. So I have this. This is printing with bubble wrap onto paper. So sometimes it's fun to combine collage from magazines and collage from materials that you've made yourself, and maybe things from your daily life as well. If you have thicker things and you're putting them into a book, I like to fold it at that point where it's going to fold into the book. Just find that works a little better to help it sit right on the page. Cool places for collage materials happening in the chat. For those of you that want to play with that never dull process, one magazine that I'll recommend that works really well, and I'm not selling this magazine, but it does work really well, and that's that fashion magazine W, because that's what this is from. The pages are very thin, but the pigment is really, first word that comes to mind is like loose on the surface. It's not a super high gloss, and so the pigment on it moves around really nicely. So if you're going to go get a magazine to do this process, that would be my first recommendation. It also tends to be lots of bright color and all sorts of weird things that work well. So I would like to include this, but I don't like that it's here on this side of the page and kind of going off of the page. So I think I'll trim it and then tuck something else behind it. And I'm going to trim the spines of these cactus off, and then I can add them back in later. These are nice fine detail scissors, but sometimes when you're in the middle of working on something, cut all the way around these little tiny things and then try to get them to glue on nicely. Not necessarily what you want to spend your time on, you want to keep making. So give yourself permission to add details back in later. This is your image and you can do whatever you like with it. Like I'm not super fond of that part of the flower, so maybe I'll just cut that part away and stick with these main flowers. So that actually cutting that part away makes it fit a lot better onto this page. But you can see I have these two spots where the page is peeking through, and I have this, which is a little bit intense, right? The color of it, but the colors are all right. So I think if I don't have too much of it, it'll actually be just fine in here. So I'll put a little bit of it there, and then I'll tuck a little bit more of it back there. So here's a thing that I do sometimes if I'm using a material that feels special, and I know that part of it is going to end up getting covered behind the collage, I'll just cut that away. I'll lose that little bit that I might be able to use for something else. Sarah, you should tell them what you're doing with your scraps.
Yeah, so what Erin is alluding to is that I made a rule for my art journal that I wouldn't throw away any tiny scraps. And I have an entire spread dedicated to just scraps. So later at the show and tell, I will show you how my scrap page is going.
I love that idea. So fun. Okay. I'll put this part over here. So you're probably seeing me burn through glue sticks over here. Glue sticks are my desert island art supply. They're my favorite art supply. I love all the wonderful art supplies from ArtSnacks, but also I'm a big glue stick super fan. And I have like a whole bunch of ends of glue sticks that have been in various travel art bags here with me today. So I'm kind of using up the very last of them as we go. Okay, so I am really liking how this page is coming along so far. I'll trim off this part. But one of the things that I like to do, this is just kind of my own visual way of thinking about things, is when I have two of something, so I've got two spots that this paper is showing up, I generally like odd numbers in my composition. So I'm going to trim this page, a little bit of this paper, and see if there's a spot that I can put just a tiny bit more of this. Let's see that right up on the edge. So maybe it's just going to be a very small stripe of this up this edge. I didn't even realize this when I selected this paper, but it goes nicely with the polka dot pattern that I put into the Never Doll. So there's also this little bit, the other side, that is just right with this. So I might end up putting some of that in there later. So we'll leave that one for now and maybe come back to it later. Sorry, Sarah, I'm going to let this scrap go. And I made myself a couple little spots that were already started in my art journal that seemed like good landing places for collage. And I have some things that I pulled out of an art book. I thought this was a very cool thing that would kind of be a simple way to start a collage. This overlay of colors. When I see something like this and I start to cut it out, one of the things I think about is, do I want to cut it right up to the edge, or do I want to keep that shadow? Because sometimes it can be kind of cool to have the shadow in part of your collage. It's a little tricky when you're cutting, but it can be very worth it. And if you change your mind later, you can always cut that part out. I worked with an older adult who had a series of unfortunate art teachers when she was a child. And so she never really thought she could be an artist. And getting the permission to cut things apart was a huge thing for her. And if she didn't like how something was coming out, I would just tell her to cut it up and make it into something new. And she loved that. Talks about that all the time. Okay, I think this background is maybe a little bit too wild for this. I thought it could maybe be a calming thing on here, but I think it's a bit much. So let's see what else I have. This is maybe a better spot for it. Okay. So what I'm seeing now is this is going to be too big to fit here, but I could trim it in the center. So because the parts that I like the best are these either end. The middle part is not so exciting to me. So if I trim it, I'm just going to unceremoniously cut the middle out. Then I can have it kind of meet here in the center of the page. A little bit more. Actually, I could back it up a little bit. Keep some of that, like that. And this is one of those sad moments, turning it over and seeing this interesting orange pattern on the back side. Oh, wow. So another thing to think about when you're building a collage is, do I want this to be only collage, pure collage, or is it more of a mixed media thing that I'm creating, where some of the background or some of the elements are things that I've created with other materials? Or am I going to add to my collage with other materials? And those combinations are really infinite, right? Those are things that you can explore and create and continue to decide as you work on your page. So we're going to get tired of my polka dot stuff, but I want to make this sit a little better onto the page. And since I've cut it, I'm going to gap a little bit there. So this is one of my many polka dot washi tape selections. Oh, sorry. And something that I like to do with washi tape is kind of disappear the edges a little bit. So I usually either layer it or double it or rip it in such a way so that it's not all hard edges. With a solid color, it's a little easier. With a pattern, you have to line it up. Okay. So that is getting interesting. And then the other thing to think about with your collage is, do I want to add text, right? Do I want to add words? And I found this fun bit of text yesterday when I was cutting things up for today. Oops. And I put adhesive on the back of it already, and I may have just gotten it stuck together, but that's okay. It'll survive. So it was this word diagonal that was formatted with diagonal color in it. And this is always kind of a decision point as well. Do I want to have it as though I've just cut it out of the magazine this way, or since I've already done a little bit of damage to this one, do I want to just let that rip be part of the art? So I feel like this wants to have something over here, but I don't know what yet. So we'll have to think about that. I'm looking at my big pile of, okay. This is kind of a random inclusion, but it was there on my table, and now that I've seen it, I kind of love it. This is from an old Life magazine. And this almost seems as though it's a collage already by itself before I've done anything to it. You've got this man's shoe, shiny dress shoe, and suit pants. And then this little duck and all of her little baby ducklings. Some of you know I love birds of all kinds, but I especially love waterfowl. It takes every ounce of self-control that I have to not get a gosling or a duckling every spring. But look at how perfect this is. If I place this right here, which lines up my collage element right with the edge of the page, it almost looks like the pants continue up into this line of the washi tape polka dots. So that's really exciting. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And now that I'm starting to do this, the story of this page is starting to come together a little bit in my mind of this idea of diagonals and lines and the little line of ducklings following after the mother duck. So again, not planned, right? I didn't come to today's collage session with the idea that I would be creating a page about ducklings, but here they are. And so what I'm doing right now, you might see me peeling this back up. This is a really good thing to think about when you're sticking things down, is to allow yourself a little flexibility so that you can play with what's in front and what's behind. So I'm just checking to make sure I'm not using any duckling feet if I do this. I might trim this page a tiny bit here so that I can have this light blue edge actually come over the top of this a little bit. But what I don't want is this is like the undo feature, but with physical materials. Control U for real physical materials. Let me take that piece of washi tape off so I can line this up better. There we go. Okay, much happier with that. So this is why I think there's something to be said for laying out your materials ahead of time, but also letting yourself have that flexibility of like, what if I peeled that up a little bit and tried tucking it underneath? I wonder what that would look like. Okay. Love my little duckling friends there. And I've got the material that made that green pattern right here. This was just transferring the pigment from this onto this page. And what I can do is use this a little bit to get a little more of that polka dot pattern onto this page in a different way. So I'm putting it underneath and I'm going to use it to create a rubbing. And this is helping my collage materials start to blend onto the page together to become one image out of many separate images. There, I don't think it'll work because there's hard stuff on the back side. So I'm just going to scribble a little bit in here. I find that regular crayon, this is kind of a fancier crayon, but just plain old regular crayon plays so nicely with collage material. especially if you're using vintage magazines, so old National Geographic, or this is an old Life magazine, they take wax crayon and colored pencil really nicely. So I really like how this page is coming out. I'm just gonna darken the edges a little bit with a little bit more wax crayon. And I'll trim it later. The only other thing I can imagine maybe adding to this, and maybe this is like the duckling's lunch, or maybe the man's lunch. This is something we got in our second ArtJournalSnacks boxes. We got old canning labels and fruit labels, depending on your ephemera pack. And this is the salmon one. And there's something about the way this color is and like kind of the airbrush in this that seems like it might be a good fit. And somewhere these ducklings are looking for some water to go in. Maybe they're going to go swimming with the salmon. But I'm going to cut the word itself out and just think about where my little salmon friend might be able to swim on this page. Maybe I should cut the sky part out and I could use that somewhere else. So this is where when I'm working on a collage or multiple collages, I do save the little scraps, because if it doesn't go on this page, it might go well elsewhere. So this will have kind of an interesting scalloped pattern, which might play well with something else. So I'm going to set that one aside. It actually looks really nice with this. So maybe those two things will become something. So here I have my salmon cut out of his sky. So depending on the adhesive you use, you may not have your full peeling it back up capability. But don't worry, there's a way to play with that too. So I'm going to stick my salmon down. I'm going to leave a little break of that blue to peek through underneath there. You can see I'm covering up part of the L, but it's going to be okay. Because I can go back in and just add a little bit of that letter back in, like completing the letter. Now the other thing you could do, and this you have to be very careful, very gentle with it. You could go in with an X-Acto knife and just very carefully cut away the top layer of your collage. Peel it back. And your L is one piece again. I'm going to have this little bit of wave over here that goes off the edge of the page that could get incorporated in. So I like the idea of maybe putting it down here because it's almost like another piece of washi tape, even though it's not. Okay. And then I think a little bit more of my polka dot tape in here. A little bit up So see how something, even just something little like that, you kind of try it and then it's like, nope, too much. But maybe it could go here. One of the things that I really love and appreciate about collage is it's very forgiving. Right? You can make different choices, make different decisions, and keep going, keep playing, and let the piece evolve. And just keep adding layers. Okay, that's really fun. I'm glad that those little ducklings made themselves known because I'm excited to have them in here. One thing I might add, a little bit dirty here thanks to my very messy hands. And I could add something here, or I could add some paint here. So I will think about that. I could also add like maybe a large dark circle or something else onto this page, or maybe a little rubbing alcohol to clean that up a bit. So we'll see how the page evolves. I'm gonna let that one be and set that one aside. And
Hey, Erin, jumping in here real quick. We have about a half hour left. We have 35 minutes left. So.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to show another mixed media example of collage. And this is a page that really didn't start with the intention of having collage in it. This was playing with different media, and then I had created this little swirl, and then that seemed just like, oh, maybe it could be a branch, maybe a little bird could live there. And it worked out exactly perfectly to have this little bird on its little branch land on this page. So sometimes collage is just about finding that one right image and finding a home for it, right? Okay, so I had one more thing that I wanted to play with, and then I would love to have a share. So if you're working on something and you would like to share, just start to aim towards that direction of getting ready to share what you've been creating, and ask any questions that you might have. We'll have the time for that. But I wanted to share making something with this because Sarah and I have been looking at this for a while. this incredible, look at how beautiful this is. We talked about this in ephemera hour, I think, too, just like how cool this is. It's the lines of a track that you run on. Look at these awesome lines. Look at this amazing collage fodder. Like, how fun is this? Okay. So it's from an athletic company. And one of the things that I think is so fun to play with this is like, depending on the direction that you put these lines, it has a completely different feeling, right? So this way, kind of going from the top swooping down is so different than this. And that's so different from this. And then you've got these ones that are curving. So I had this page that I had done some leaf rubbings and a little bit of background, and the warmth in this green seems to go well with the warm gray here. So I thought this might be a spot that some of this might live. So I like the way that looks. And there's also something about the way these rubbings came out, because they're kind of rough, that it almost looks like the surface of a track that you might run on. So I'm thinking something like that, just kind of simple, not too much. And it might get a little bit of something like someone or something, or maybe a word. I do a lot of words in my art and in my art journal, so sometimes I like to take a break and have pages that are just visual. And you've seen me be very messy with glue sticks. If you're really concerned about that, one thing you can do is use wax paper or scrap paper at your side and kind of use that to be gluing on. But I think some of you have heard me say this before. I also really like the messy resist that with spray paint to be overspray. I don't know if there's a term for that with glue stick, but the kind of overspreading of glue stick can create an interesting resist. Okay, so there's the page with just 2 of those pieces put into it. And I think there's maybe some ways that some layering of this in different ways might be interesting. But I'm going to play with that some more and not make that decision quite yet. This was ephemera that was, or collage material that was hard to use because I felt very precious about it and like I loved it so much that I was not wanting to use it. So using it today felt important. And this is another example of something I showed during ephemera hour that again, it kind of felt precious. So maybe they need to be on the same page together because visually it kind of does work. So we'll see. I'll let that page sit for a bit. And why don't we see if there are any questions or people would like to share. I would love to invite people to share. And if you don't have it on gallery view, good idea to put it on gallery view so that you can, or sorry, rather speaker view, right? Or Sarah can pin people also if they're speaking.
Yeah, I will. If you would like to share, feel free to digitally raise your hand or visually raise your hand. I will spotlight your screen. And oh, I already see someone excited to. So Heather, I'm going to spotlight you. And if you'd like to chat, feel free to unmute yourself.
So I bought a children's book and it was about pirates. And I had some stamps and I did watercolor and some collaging over on the top for different sky things, but it's been fun.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah,
Thank you
love
for
that.
sharing.
Love that scale shift in there from the mermaid to then the boat in the background. It's really great. Wonderful thing to use multiple parts of a children's book because the colors go together so nicely, right? Because they're all telling one story. Book.
All right, Gina, I see you. I'm going to spotlight you so everyone can check out your work.
This one, which is a combination of some newspaper clippings and the spray with the stencils from the other day. And I did have one other page that I worked on.
Dozens of FBI agents raid a condo owned by Russian.
Yikes. Mute that. Okay.
So fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Amazing. All right. Anybody else want to share? All right, Melissa, I see your virtual hand is up. I'll spotlight you. Okay.
Yeah. I have no idea where this is going, but I love putting tissue paper and things and then putting watercolor on it because it's so soft that it just does really interesting things with the paint.
Thank you. And I want to call attention to something in Melissa's, the post-it, the back of the post-it. Because I wanted to mention that to give yourself that permission and that idea to use the backs of things and the leftovers in the packaging, but also that post-its are such a great thing to include into your collage as a natural spot to do a little writing, right? So if you've done a collage and maybe you're doing it in your art journal or you're doing it somewhere that's a little bit more about expressing and telling a story, give yourself permission to just glue that post-it right into your collage, and then you've got a spot that you can write your notes or write your response or write anything else you want to write about the story of that collage.
Very nice. Thank you, Melissa. Let's see, I'm gonna call on Ray. I'm gonna spotlight your video. Feel free to unmute and tell us about what you're gonna share.
Okay, oh, hi. Here,
Hi,
go.
yeah, I don't see it here. Here we go. Yeah, there are two of us here. This is Ray over here, and I'm Cindy.
Hi, Ray and Cindy.
I'm making some cards. I've got some cardstock here. So this is the first one I made. Whoops, can you see it? And it's kind of out of focus, but I live in Sedona, and this is the woman this is Sedona Schnebly and TC Schnebly, who the town is named for. And he was a postmaster. So I've got these typewriters in there, and I want to put a stamp on it. I've got old stamps, but I don't have them with me. So I want to put a stamp on it to complete it too. And I folded over the paper that I used as the base in the back and the front. And then I'm just starting another one. This is an old check statement book that I had. It was very old. I was going through old stuff and I wet it down so that all the words would just kind of, so I'm using that as a background for this new one. And I did the same thing where I folded it over a little bit inside. So that's what I've been doing in the meantime. It's been fun.
Beautiful.
Okay, I do completely different things than Cindy does. I mean, it's totally, here's mine.
Much more in the moment and intuitive.
Oh,
There you go.
I started with an AARP magazine cover. And I usually do collages where I cut out squares and rectangles from the Economist magazine. So in this case, I tore them, so I couldn't do the squares. And I just started gluing things on top of the AARP cover because I think the AARP magazine is horrible. So I tried to pick something.
Here's the A.
I don't know, it just seemed like that was, and then and I started using smaller pieces because I was talking to someone who was doing painted collage. Is that what it's called? Where you paint and then just use little bitty pieces of color. Anyway, so this is very different than what I usually do, but it is chaotic. I mean, I always, no matter what I do, I end up making it this chaotic jumble of stuff. I'm not quite sure why. But that's just the way I end up doing it. And then I extended out the sides because I was like, wait a minute, why do I have to be limited by the square of the paper? Just work out from the edges. So this has been kind of fun.
Excellent. Great. Thank you both for sharing. And that's a really good piece of advice too. Sometimes we collage something down and where we put it, we would have to cut the edge off of something that we love. Why not just make your paper bigger, right? Like if you're in your art journal, have it fold out. If you're working on a piece of paper, add another piece of paper at the back, make it bigger, extend it out, keep going, right? No rules, unless you have some, like you're submitting for a show and there's size requirements. Other than that, you can make it whatever size you want.
Amazing. Anybody else want to share what they have? I'll go. Let me spotlight myself. Okay, cool. So I did 2 spreads. Well, first, quick peek at my scrap page. It's just filled with pieces that are pretty small and annoying, and I just figured I'll just keep them in the sketchbook as opposed to throwing them away. So this is maybe like a week's worth of scraps. So we'll see what that looks like after a month. I'm feeling green today, so lots of green pieces coming together in my collage. I'm really jealous of the stuff that Erin has, the like stuff that's rubbing away the pigment. So I figured I would start adding stuff. So I have just a makeup sponge and some gouache. So I've been using it to like sponge some textures on. And then this is my second page that's in process. You can see the sponging technique. I just took like a super light gouache, and then this is like an acrylic ink that's just dropped on there. So I like it so far. Things are going well. And I agree, it is a little chaotic, and I also like chaos too. So I'm leaning into that today.
Can't be chaotic in our art, like, you know, it's such a good place for a safe chaos.
Absolutely. All right, anybody else feel like sharing? If not, we can take a break and get back into working. Erin, I'm going to spotlight your studio desk. All right.
Okay, great. We'll take a little bit more time to play. This is kind of what I was talking about with this idea of having something fold out. Some of you have seen this as it's been evolving. It was I think it was a travel brochure, but it had all these wonderful little tabs in it. And it just was already really beautiful and interesting. And I've used it as a kind of a home for some writing and for some collage. And this spot needs something. So this is this kind of the terms and conditions of whatever this travel was. I don't even remember if it was an airline or what, but I went over the background with a matte medium mixed with gray acrylic. And then there's a little bit of wax on here, but the rest of this is just open for something. And it's actually occurring to me as I'm sitting here that this piece that I cut out of that other, cut off of the salmon, the sky is kind of a good color with some of this. So I actually might put that there. And then here, I just feel like this wants something a little bit more representational.
Hey, Erin, also just noted in the chat, we're curious about how you add that fold out to extend your page.
Yeah, definitely. So this was an existing fold out. That's the cool thing. This was this came from, if it was from an airline, it was their kind of their travel thing. So I glued it in, I glued the back of it in, and then left everything else exactly as it was. And so it was this, it's not even stapled, it's glued together little booklet that came. And so I just glued it right in and then have been adding to it. Okay, and I think I found the perfect thing. I've been holding on to this for quite a while. This came from an old Life magazine. It's a very silly source. So it's a bad breath, or it's a Listerine ad, an old Listerine ad from copyright 1961. And this is the image. How fabulous are these folks? And I am just thinking about them right here, and then the text that I left from the travel brochure that says a new kind of view. So again, this is one of those things that sometimes cutting up a piece of ephemera like this, an old magazine, can feel hard, but in the interest of laughter, I'm all for it. Okay, so another thing to know about using vintage ephemera and old magazine pages in collage, they're going to stick a lot better with whatever adhesive you're using, but they're also going to be more fragile when you're cutting. So it's just a thing to know, be careful with. These are the scissors I'm using right now are a little bit dull. And so I'm aware of needing to be careful as I'm cutting, because sometimes when you're cutting, the page will almost tear, or in some cases, if it's very old ephemera, disintegrate. So just be careful. I'm gonna leave a little bit of a border on these legs because the legs of this chair is kind of delicate. I want to leave some of my scribbling here. Enable these people to be on this page. I don't want to lose his shadow. So I think I'm going to cut the rest of these legs and cut around there and then leave the white under this part. I'm glad that these two have finally found a home. I've been holding on to them for quite a while. The dangerous thing about collage, right? So many interesting things that you hold on to that might be just right for some things, but you can't hold on to them forever. Sometimes you just need to use them. I think I'll cut here. Oh, it's actually occurring to me now that this man's shoes and pants are kind of like that one leg that's in the page with the ducklings. So maybe he leaves here and goes out and encounters the mama duck and her little line of ducklings. Now I'm starting to have a whole story being told in my art journal. Okay, I like that. Not enthusiastic. So other thing to just be careful of with small bits and vintage magazine page. If you're wondering what the other side of that ad was, it was again something that I'm kind of regretting now. I didn't scan, but it was Richard Nixon meeting an elephant, meeting a baby elephant. I don't know what I would have done with that, but I feel like there's some kind of story that could have been told. Okay. So when you're placing something like this, think about where the fold is. And I kind of like the idea of them being on separate pages. Right, so placing them in such a way so that they really are separate here. If you are gluing something across a fold and it's only a little bit that's going to go over, just know that it may peel up. So putting a little bit more glue there is a good idea. Or putting some matte medium. So this is an ultra matte medium, and I'm going to put a little bit underneath and a little bit over the top. Knowing this is going to change the surface of the paper a little bit, that's okay. But in a spot like this, you wouldn't want to use something glossy because it'll stick together. So I'm actually going to brush this across here a little bit more because it is going to create an interesting texture that I can go back in and play with later. And so here's a plug for joining our community mix. If you're not already there, is that you'll see not only these completed pages, but other people's pieces that maybe they'll post there. We encourage you to do that. So this is helping down the road. It's going to create a texture there on this surface, and then I can go back in and add more material and lose the line of the edge of that magazine paper. So we'll let that dry. I have a couple other things that I wanted to recommend, but before I do that, part of this breath freshener ad actually does need to stay on this page. So I'm going to cut off the bad breath portion and leave this text is such an insidious come between it. I'm not exactly sure what that has to do with this tropical view over here, but I'll figure it out as the page evolves. I'm just using a wax crayon right now to accentuate that part. Again, it's going to create a texture that I can play with more later. So we will let that dry. I had a couple other recommendations I'd like to make for your collaging practice. You could, so first one is to think about, am I using something as it is, or am I changing it in some way? Am I cutting it apart, taking parts and pieces of it? Am I cutting or am I ripping? Okay, and there is something so satisfying about ripping paper, right? We don't get to do it all that often in our daily life. Maybe we rip up junk mail, but there's something really, really wonderful and fun about ripping up materials and then using that ripped edge. A thing to think about when you're ripping is, which side am I ripping on? Because if you rip towards yourself and the part that you want to use is the part that you're holding, right, and you're ripping part of it away, you're going to end up with a white edge there, right? That's just how things tear. That might be a beautiful visual component, but if you're wanting to bring two things together and have them kind of seamlessly go, like, so for Sarah's example of using all these different greens, if she wanted to have two green things come together and have it seem like they were really joined, then ripping it, the part she was getting rid of, ripping that away so that the edge of the thing she was keeping with the ripped edge has a clean edge, meaning it doesn't show the white of the paper. It's a little thing, but it can really make the difference in your collage. So thinking about your ripping, enjoying the process of ripping, and then thinking about what are different ways that I can play with this collage material. You can crumple something up, flatten it back out, and do wax rubbing on top, and you've kind of antiqued something that maybe came from an advertising magazine, but now you've made it look a little bit older, a little bit more interesting, a little different, so that you could collage from that and somebody else could collage from that, and it's going to look very different in both of your materials. If you're collaging with other people, I know we have a couple folks that are collaging together today. Think about, what if we both use the same image? What could we make with it? And the challenge being, like, we all have to, we're going to start with this one image and we're going to do something totally different with it and see what happens. That can be really fun. And that's one of the things that's been fun in ArtJournalSnacks is everyone gets ephemera kits, but everyone gets some of the same stuff and some stuff that's different. And so it's neat to see how people are remixing and recombining these materials together. And then my last recommendation is about, because we get this question a lot about collage storage and what do you do with like cool things that you find for collaging. And I know everyone kind of has their own way of storing things, but I can share that one thing that I do that is very helpful. If I know I want to sit down and collage, getting out a stack of magazines, sometimes you get lost in the magazines, right? And all of a sudden you're reading an article, or all of a sudden you're clicking away to go look at something online that you saw in an ad instead of continuing to stay in your art process. So something that I will do is sit down with a stack of magazines and I rip and I tear and I cut things out and then I sort it. So I have a box that has only words and phrases. I have a box that has only backgrounds. I have a box that has people, one for animals, one for objects. And then I have various other combinations of materials for other purposes. So that has been really helpful for me, because then if I'm looking for something, or I know I want some words or some text, I have a spot to go. If I know I want animals, I can go look at the animals. I can get people really easily, and I've got it all sorted out for myself. And that helps to maintain or contain the chaos as well. And I had an older adult who I worked with who was watching me do this one day, kind of go through magazines and ripping stuff and tearing it out and sorting it. He was like, "Is this your full-time job?" And I said, "Well, yeah, kind of, right? Kind of lucky enough to have it kind of be my full-time job." All right, so those are the recommendations that I wanted to share with you, and wanted to give one last chance for questions or anything else that people would like to share.
If you'd like to share, you can give me a visual wave or raise your virtual hand. I'm happy to spotlight you if you want to show off what you've made. I see Anne Marie Jordan. I'm going to spotlight you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, let's see. Yeah, okay. You can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my second art journal, and at the beginning of the year, some friends posted on Facebook a little, I think they're memes, I don't know, but it was like this square, and it just had all these letters in it, right? And it said, the first 4 words that you see are your words for 2023. So the first journal, I put those 4 words in on random pages. And as I've been working through the first journal, I realized each journal should have a word. So now the new journal is my power journal. And this is what I worked on today.
Love it. Oh, so great.
And my words are changed. So the first journal has changed at the beginning, and then so many pages in it said power, and so many pages in it says self-care, and the last word I have is compassion. So my other journals will be focused on those. But the ladies that talked about the AARP magazine, so I think most of these women's faces are from there. And there's crayon, watercolor, and the pictures. So it's been kind of fun to see where they're going to go. And every minute I hear myself saying like the power of, so I have like the power of water, the power of money, the power of community. So it'll be fun to see what happens. So it's a lot. This is a great thing. Thank you all for doing it.
Thank you for sharing.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for sharing. I see Monica. I'm going to spotlight you, so feel free to turn your camera on, or let me see. Spotlight for everyone. Okay, go for it.
Hello.
Hi.
So this is what I came up with. I glued the flower down and instantly regretted it. So when starting a collage, is it good to have one central idea or picture in mind, or just be more intuitive? What's better?
It really depends on the person, but one thing that I learned from an older adult that I worked with who had been an art teacher, her collage process was she would put one little bit of glue on the back of a bigger thing and put that where she thought she wanted it, but she left the sides totally loose. And so then she could kind of change, is this going to be behind or is it going to be on top? And she could kind of tuck things in. You saw me doing some peeling up, but she avoided that altogether by having that tactic that she used that I thought was so smart. Generally, composition wise, sorry, I have kind of weird light thing going on. One of the things that I learned from one of my favorite teachers was to have a bride in your image, meaning to have something that's kind of the main focus of your image, and that you shouldn't have 2 brides, right? In your image, or you shouldn't even have maybe a bride and a groom. You should have one bride, and that's your one main image. So if that metaphor works for you, think about that. Like you have the thing that's like the main focus. But there's also something really delightful about looking at the image that we saw earlier that was like all the different things on the page. That's really fun too. So it just kind of depends on what you're going for. Yeah, thank you. Could you hold it up one more time for us, Monica?
Yeah, here is my representational chaotic cactus. I also did this one, which I'm a little more pleased with. It's a neutral colored background. I guess I need a bride for this.
And it might come to you later, you know. You
Yeah,
might find it
yeah.
later.
Lots
Great.
of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Monica. I'm going to hand it over to Denise. Let me spotlight you. Okay, show us what you've got.
Hi. So I'm still pretty new at collaging. This is just a journal that I made. I haven't collaged in it yet. But just getting random bits of paper, some that I've printed with a jelly plate and others that came from books and whatever. The cover is a napkin, a printed napkin that I collaged onto a manila envelope.
Oh,
And
cool.
then the other piece, this is really my first collage piece. I'm giving it to my mom for Mother's Day. It was, oh, sorry about the glare. It was a class that I just did recently. So it's just like paint on the background and torn paper that most of it was jelly printed, and then some book pages in there too. So thank you. I'm excited about that for my mom.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That book looks like it's going to be such a fun home for so many different things. Really great.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We are actually at time, but if there is anybody that is, really dying to show off some of their work, please feel free to raise your hand, or if you have a question for Dr. Aaron, or we have it. Also, if you go into gallery view, there are some people who have put their artwork up. Annie, actually, I'm going to spotlight you because you are showing your piece right now.
Oh, so cool.
Very cool.
Love that.
Really nice.
Just some stuff.
It's exactly what it is. Awesome. Thank you. Any last shares that we want to put out there before I give my spiel?
I can just want to thank Collage Magazine for hosting this day, for listing us on their site as well as a official World Collage Day event, and just to say they have a beautiful edition of Collage Magazine for World Collage Day. I believe you can still get it on their website, and I just keep flipping to this page because it cracks me up. So it has articles about collage, but it also has some materials that each of the writers has created for you, and including a whole page of meat. So if you needed a whole page of meat for collaging with, they've got you covered. There's also lots of other wonderful things in here, but thank you to Collage Magazine for having this beautiful day for us all over the world, and you've been part of that. And as Sarah does her closing spiel, I'll also put into the chat the hashtag for today.
Yes, so if you are big on social media, feel free to post your work using the hashtag so everyone who is involved today across the world can see it. I also encourage everyone to post your work on ArtSnacks Mix. You can get familiar with that platform. It is the ArtSnacks community. We have about 10,000 members on there. It's a totally free community that is regularly updated with customer artwork, artist artwork, questions. We sometimes put some deals on there and stuff like that. So it is a thriving community. I also just want to put in the chat here, I made a coupon code. If anyone is curious about Art Journal Snacks, that is our quarterly subscription for the practice of art journaling. Erin runs the live streams that go along with that quarterly subscription. Every quarter you get a new journal that's totally blank. You get some art supplies and you get a pack of curated ephemera straight from Erin. She curates all the ephemera in that box and just gives you a new opportunity every quarter to make some art and also meet some other collage artists as well. So I put in the chat, it's World Collage Day. You'll get 15% off your quarterly subscription. And the link is artsnacks.co/artjournalsnacks. So thank you, Erin, for having us here today for our World Collage Day celebration and leading us in this workshop. Thank you, Collage Magazine. I don't think anyone from Collage Magazine is here, but if you are, amazing. We're flattered. Thank you for coming. We'll make sure that we send them some photos of what people have made. And thank you all for spending your Saturday with us. This is so amazing that we were able to do it. So with that, I wish everyone a happy weekend. Happy Mother's Day if you are a mother. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone.